I have mentioned in a previous entry about how they could have changed their game and done something with it to make it a marvelous and fantastic game, but they didn't because they couldn't monetize it as much as they did. But if we go back in time, before online gaming was a really big thing and before microtransactions, and we take that same concept and we disallow these companies to make those types of marketing decisions, what we end up with is a very good game such as Pokemon Trading Card Game, and this game is great. When you look at the trading card games today and you look at the online versions are basically just an extension of the actual card game itself, which is fine in that it should follow the same rules if you want to replicate that, but they also replicate all of the negatives as well, having to buy cards individually with real money, spending real money on booster packs. Whereas you can look at something like the original Pokemon trading card game on the Game Boy Color, and it just baffles me that you can have a game so good from so far back in this system, but these days it's kind of like, we can't do that. We have to make money off this. We have to be able to sell booster packs and make it multiplayer only, or if we have a single player, make it absolutely minimal. But no, this game is fantastic. It has the sense of adventure that you want from a game like this. It has the sense of ownership and the sense of earning your cards as you play through the game, and it's just really good for doing that. Now, another little extra bonus I remember is that when you bought this game, you also got a Pokemon card with it, as sort of like a promotional Meowth card. But this game basically takes the Pokemon trading card game, the first 3 sets, the base set, the jungle set, and the fossil set, along with a few extra bonus cards that they throw in, and they make it its own adventure. Now, there isn't much of a story behind this game. You have to go to the different areas based off different types of Pokemon, like there's the psychic area, and then there's the fire area, and you win medals, and so you use those to get to the Pokemon Championship at the end, which kind of replicates how the actual Pokemon games are, which makes sense, but with Pokemon cards. And just the ability to play against different people and earn more cards to customize your deck, to refine it just that little bit more, is so interesting and so satisfying. One of the things I love about this game is that there's no real inherent strength of each of the individual main bosses. They're kind of like gym leaders, but they're not called gym leaders. But I'll just call them gym leaders for the sake of this. There's no inherent order or inherent difficulty. It's all based on what deck you have. So you start the game and you can choose a Charmander, Bulbasaur or Squirtle deck, and you have a really pretty terrible deck based loosely on that Pokemon. And as you go around and you beat the different opponents as well as the quote-unquote gym leaders, they will give you booster packs with cards in them. And so that alone is absolutely fantastic. And there was a Pokemon trading card game too, but unfortunately it was only released in Japan, so that's a shame. However, I think I will just spend a bit of time explaining how the Pokemon trading card game works. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I'll basically explain. The way that you win the game is by either wiping out all of your opponent's Pokemon or taking all of your prizes, and whenever you defeat an opponent's Pokemon, you take a prize. You have 1 active Pokemon out, and then you have up to 5 on the bench, so they're sort of like your backup. You can also put on evolutionary cards to evolve them into their higher forms, and each Pokemon has their own amount of health and different abilities that cost energy to use. And energy cards, you can attach those 1 per turn to a Pokemon, and the more energy that a Pokemon has, the more of their abilities they'll gain access to. And there's different types of energy which correspond to different types of energy requirements. You might have fire energy or colourless energy, which can take any type of energy. But you can only attack once, and you can only attack at the end of your turn. You also have Pokemon with Pokemon powers, so they have extra effects. So for example, Snorlax is immune to status effects, and Mankey, you can look at the top card of your deck or look at one of your prizes or something like that. And you also have, like, for example, Alakazam, where you can move around damage across your own Pokemon in different ways. And you also have trainer cards as well, and these are cards that you could just use during your turn to do extra added effects. So for example, a potion trainer card will heal your Pokemon, and you can also use a Pokeball to have a chance at getting a Pokemon out of your deck. And there's also the Pokedex, for example, which will allow you to rearrange some cards in your deck. But the game has changed a lot since then, and if you go to play the Pokemon trading card game today with the actual physical cards, I am sure there's a lot that's different. I've not played it really, very briefly, only maybe a couple games or so with the newer formats, but it is a lot different with different types of cards that just weren't around in these original 3 sets. And the original 3 sets, that's like my time of Pokemon cards. I remember going to the shops with my nana and finally finding a booster pack for the fossil set and being really happy about that. This game is one of the most important games to me, and what I mean by that is this is a game that really opened my eyes to what games could do. And whilst I certainly don't think it's the most important game in my life, I think this one really played a big role in my development as a gamer, so to speak. But the way that I discovered this game was very strange because we were going out shopping, and I remember my friend Matthew came over and he knocked on the door, and I had to say to him, sorry, we're going out. And he told me to get this game, and I just said, alright, okay, and then I went and got it. So the actual gap between finding out about this game and then going to get it was very small. He just said, get this game, and I was just like, okay. It was really as simple as that. And so we went out and we went to Woolworths, and this is the same, if memory serves me correctly, this was the same place that I got the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and I saw there Pokemon Red and Blue. Now, in this entry I am specifically referring to the whole set of Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow. I am including them all under this one entry. I'm not going to separate them out because I think they are similar enough that I can put them all under the same entry here. But the first generation of Pokemon. I remember looking at both Red and Blue, and we went to the front, the cashier, and we asked them what the difference was between Red and Blue because I didn't know. And they said, because they were looking at the back of the box, and they were saying that, well, in this game you can get some Pokemon that you can't get in this one, and this one you can get some Pokemon you can't get in that one, so you have to trade with people who have the other game and all that, which has really introduced me to the concept. And I was just like, okay, I'll get Red then. And my reasoning for that was that I predicted that most of the people would have Blue. I had a feeling, and from what I experienced from that point on, that actually turned out to be true. There was a lot more people that did have Blue compared to the amount of people that had Red. And I went with Red, and I remember sitting in the car looking at the box, seeing Charizard and thinking to myself, well, what is this game? Is it a platform game? I actually imagined like a platform game where you could ride this dragon so that you could fly over walls and all that sort of stuff. That's how I imagined it in my mind. And then I got home and played it, and it turned out to be an RPG, a turn-based RPG, and this was my first experience with this type of gameplay, and I was absolutely blown away by it. I was seriously really amazed by this game. I remember at the start of the game when Professor Oak tells you to pick a Pokemon, people say this is a really difficult decision for people to make, but for me I just thought, well, Charmander, fire, come on, better than grass and water, obviously, because you know, when you're that young, that's the type of thing that you think about. I probably would have been 11 at the time, either 10 or 11, somewhere within that range. And I played this game and I never got hit with that, oh, why do I gotta take turns, why can't I move during a fight? That never struck me, because I mean, I know that type of thing that a lot of people experience when they first see a turn-based RPG, but that wasn't me. It was just, look at these attacks I can do, this is so cool. And then finding out that Pokemon could level up, they could get stronger as you use them, and finding out that you can get Pokeballs and then you can catch Pokemon, and then once you've done that, those Pokemon are yours to keep, and you can go and get more Pokemon, and then once you've got those Pokemon you can keep them and train them and get them stronger. That absolutely blew my mind. Just this idea that I can do something and it's a part of me, it's a part of my collection within this game. It's not just a case of playing and unlocking, it's my thing. I catch a Weedle, I level that Weedle up, I teach it the abilities, I choose when to use it and when to give it the experience and all that sort of stuff, and I was just blown away by it. Now, this game, a lot of people will say, is very outdated. I don't like that term outdated because I don't think anything is outdated in terms of games. I really don't understand how a game mechanic can be outdated. I just don't get it. And people will say that the game's very unbalanced, and okay, I can give you that. And if you were to play competitively, then that would make the game less interesting than a more modern Pokemon game. I will grant you that. And I will perfectly grant you that there are little tricks and things that you can do to make the game a lot easier than otherwise. Fine. I recognise that as a flaw, however, my experience of the game was having a lot of fun, and I think I placed a lot more emphasis on the whole gotta catch 'em all thing than other people did, because I remember some people would just get some Pokemon and then they just stick with that team, but I was like, yeah, I've got my nice team, I've got my really powerful Charmander who's going to become a Charmeleon and all that. And despite all that, I remember just thinking, yeah, I want more Pokemon. I want to fill out my Pokedex. And I remember spending many nights in my old bedroom during the winter when it was dark with a little lamp next to my TV. And I had like other games consoles there, but I had this little lamp, and I remember just laying on my bed playing Pokemon, and I'd do that for ages, and I absolutely loved it. My friend Matthew, he actually got both Pokemon Red and Blue together and got a Game Boy Color, so I was kind of jealous of how he got a Game Boy Color and Red and Blue, and he did eventually catch them all and get them all. One way by being trading with himself from one version to the other. He focused a lot more on the blue version, but I just remember spending so much time on this game. I remember when I first encountered Zapdos. I think I actually used my Master Ball on Zapdos now that I think about it, first time I played it. And I remember hearing about Mewtwo, the elusive Mewtwo, and I also remember how Gary was the champion at the end of the Elite Four, but I didn't know that, and Matthew told me that he was, but I had only ever gotten up to Lance, and so I was thinking like, no way, Lance is really hard, there's no way you have to fight Gary after Lance. Is Gary really powerful now? Ooh. Although I know he wasn't called Gary, strictly speaking, it's Blue, but you know, we knew him as Gary. And I remember him saying, there's a TV show of Pokemon, and he told me what time to watch it on Saturday mornings on SMTV Live. Anyone who's my age from the UK will remember SMTV Live, probably. And I remember seeing the first episode and thinking, oh, this is Pokemon, this thing here is Pokemon. And I also have memories of my dad's wife's son also showing me his emulated version of Pokemon Blue in the Safari Zone and everything. And the whole game, just, I really, really liked it. So this is a game that I saw at my friend Bridges' house, and it was his brother who I believe had the game. Because they had the game on the Xbox 360 and his brother had the Xbox 360, that's where he played it. And I was already familiar with very similar games because this game is basically a crossover between two existing franchises, and they decided to basically meld them together, and I have to stop saying basically all the time. But they melded these two franchises together, and what we had was Warriors Orochi. Now, I did eventually get this game for myself on the PS2 because this was before I had an Xbox 360. This would have been around 2006, 2007, maybe around that time, I don't know. But I knew what Dynasty Warriors was. I wasn't too familiar with Samurai Warriors, so I wasn't sure how that was going to affect this game. But this game you have the characters from Dynasty Warriors and you have the characters from Samurai Warriors. And the basics of Dynasty Warriors is that you pick a character and you run around this battlefield and you kill a lot of enemies. People say all you do is mash square, and this is one of the big points I have to bring up against this type of argument, is that whilst the combat itself is pretty simple, yes, a lot of it is pressing one button. First of all, there are other buttons involved, such as the triangle button, which will unleash an extra attack at the end of a combo, or the circle button, which will unleash the character's special ability once the bar has fully charged. But even despite that, I have to point out that these games are a lot more focused on the leveling system and developing your set of characters as you go on than it is about your own combat prowess. And if it was like a fighting game where you had to be able to pull off certain button combinations, I probably wouldn't like it as much, because I don't find that type of input entertaining very much, as I am sure I've made clear several times at this point. But in this game, you don't just choose one character, you choose 3 characters, because this game has loads of characters. It's like 90 something that you can get total, but you can choose 3 characters, and in the middle of combat you can switch between them, and whenever a character is inactive that you're not using, they will slowly heal. So you've kind of got that health regeneration going on there. The way that a character levels up is that when a character defeats an enemy, they'll get an amount of experience. But also when you defeat an officer, or a general, or whatever you want to call them, they will drop a scroll, and whoever picks up that scroll will get the experience, so you can switch to any other character and walk into it and pick up that experience. And each character maxes out at level 99, and it really doesn't take much time at all to get from level 1 to level 99, but the thing is that there's so many characters that it's going to take ages if you want to fully max out anyway. But the leveling system in that regard is quite simple. It always takes a little bit more experience between each level to level up, and whilst each character starts with their own stats, the more you level up, the more similar the characters become, because rather than increasing that character's stats by a percentage of what their stats are, it more so closes in the gap between what their absolute max stats would be with them all full and their current stats. So if, for example, you have a character with a lot of attack power but a very small amount of speed, then leveling them up will increase their speed more than it will increase their attack power. But their speed won't overtake their attack power, it'll just eventually even out when they max out at level 99, which is a very strange system, but a completely valid one. Each character can hold a set amount of weapons at a time. I believe it's about 10, and each time you get a weapon, it will be of a certain tier, because weapons go in 4 tiers. And each weapon will also have a slight modifier to its attack power, and it will also have a set of effects. And these are effects such as fire damage, or more effective against officers, or reach that will make the weapon longer, that type of stuff. And there's a rather intricate system to this, because you can spend your growth points, which you also accumulate by gaining experience. You can fuse weapons together within a particular character set, and by doing so you can expand the amount of slots where they can hold different effects, and you can also carry over effects from one weapon to another as you are fusing them together. But also you can stack them on top of each other in order to add their level up. So you might have 2 spears that this character has with fire level 4, you can meld them together, and you can spend some of these growth points to add those levels together to make it more effective. It's very nice. But also these growth points you can use to translate into experience. So say you have 500 growth points, you can just throw that onto a level 1 character and just give them 500 experience straight off the bat like that. And so I suppose the technique here is that if you have characters that you don't like as much, that you want to use less, you'll want to stack your growth points onto them so that you don't have to level them up as much. And you also unlock abilities that you can get for the characters, which you will get by accomplishing certain goals as set characters, which will either give you abilities or level up the abilities. These are like passive skills, so there might be things like increased experience intake, or you sat with a horse, that type of stuff. And the more of these that you get, the more they pile onto each other, and you can equip up to 10 of these, I think, or maybe it's 8, I don't remember the exact number. You can equip a set amount of these onto your character in order to add extra effects. And then there's also proficiencies, where if you kill enough officers with a certain character, they will just generally get stronger. So there's all sorts of different mechanics and interactions between things, and I love that, as you probably could tell.